So thank you, Nick, for this very friendly introduction. I'm happy to be here. This is the place where the Munich Security Conference has taken place. And that's kind of strange because though we are here at a conference of private equity, venture capital, M&A, a community really, we will have to deal, in my talk at least, with some of the topics that are usually treated during the Munich Security Conference. So geopolitics is kind of coming close to investment activity. And you will see that this is kind of providing a lot of shifts and also disruptions to the business models that we are used to. It's kind of dramatic, especially the last 2 years. I will show some evidence what is happening presently. And I think this hasn't been really grasped in the public sphere, in the media yet, what is really happening there. 2 questions are important for my talk here. The first one is, how advanced is decoupling at all? How deep is it impacting our global economy? And that's the first big question. The second one will be, what can we do? What kind of new structures are emerging that provide opportunities for novel investments? And there's a lot going on. I think also these topics are not being grasped yet in the public discussion. And so I will point you a little bit to what I see as emerging new structures that will shape the world economy for the near future. Is decoupling between China and the US really happening? Some people doubt it because trade is still going quite well. It's holding things together. There are disruptions in certain fields. I will try to really unbundle that now and to show what is happening on the ground. One rather spectacular case that you may be familiar with is what happened to Sequoia Capital this year, actually. It became public this year. The discussion was starting much earlier, but this is a breakup story, a major breakup story that is due to geopolitical frictions. The idea was, when they founded Sequoia China in 2005, that was the slogan, kind of to marry American investors with Chinese founders, to marry Silicon Valley capital with Chinese entrepreneurialism. That was the idea. And it was super successful. It was a shared brand. It drew global investors. We had a transnational profit-sharing arrangement. There was some friction in that, actually, because the contribution by the China unit was outsized, actually, at least until 2021. And you see the big stories that came with seed capital from Sequoia. It was Alibaba, thanks to Sequoia, Didi, Meituan, DJI, the drone maker, 70% of world market share, ByteDance, TikToks, and many other stories here that were seed funded by Sequoia. This was a super central financier for big tech in China. A very important, indispensable firm, I would say. So I'm familiar with that unit already for actually since the 2005 story, when they started business. So they have now Sequoia China, 1,000 portfolio companies and $56 billion under management. What happened from 2021 was kind of earth-shaking. And that's important, what I want to stress here. It came from both sides. Some people say decoupling is driven by the American side. It's not. The Chinese side is also driving it. And I'm taking a decidedly European perspective here, so trying to stand in the middle and to observe what is happening on both sides. Yeah? And what hit Sequoia's business model hard was the bans on business model, for example, edutech freezing listings of Didi, you probably are aware of it, and Alibaba units, and pushing down valuations big time all over the globe of Chinese technology companies. And this was hurting the business models, it was hurting the seed capital that Sequoia had invested, and this really brought kind of a shock to their business model from a domestic regulator's drive in China. It was really an ad hoc, kind of arbitrary intervention into business models that ran very well in China. That was a hit. On the other side, Sequoia Capital, the international global organization, has been constantly under attack in the US. Domestic politics is here. They were blamed for funding surveillance military technology in Xinjiang and also in other parts of China, and to fund tech rivals, US tech rivals in China, and thereby undermine American leadership all the way. So you see how this kind of, the pressure from both sides really changed the whole environment. What happened now, and it was announced only this June fully, It's a complete breakup, a hard breakup, I would say. So what we are seeing here, it will stop this year, this joint, this profit-sharing business model, and separate units, they will be split out, and the China unit won't even use the term sequoia. They are using Hongshan, that's redwood, that's the direct translation of sequoia in Chinese, but they will be held as a distinct firm, as a separate brand and a completely independent entity from 2025. No joint business anymore. And the other parts of Sequoia, they will split up in a US and Europe division and a India and Southeast Asia division, which is kind of pointing to what is happening presently. So people are reorienting away from China towards usually now Southeast Asian and Indian locations for their investment. You see a lot here in that story. Now that's just a case study, but a very important one, a very telling one, I think. What comes out of it is that navigating these geopolitics, these tense geopolitics, and the increased political scrutiny in both countries, US and China, that this becomes increasingly impractical. It's not practicable anymore to do it. And there are many, many experiences from other parts of the market in that. And this is so doing the investments across the two biggest markets, US and China, is not practicable in the way that it had been before. It's really a disruption, a major disruption. And you can say, okay, Sequoia is one case, it's a special case. It's not. I show you the most recent data, that's from the JP Morgan research report, very recent here, and we see really a massive reversal of investment flows on many levels. And FDI, if you just see the graph, the black graph on the left-hand side for the net flows of FDI, you see how they are sinking rapidly presently. 2023, 22. It started already last year. And you see on the right-hand side here the declining venture capital private equity deals in China. Especially, again, the black graph is the share of US investors. You see that they had a share once of 80% in venture capital and PE capital in China. Now they are down to under 30% within a short period of time. They are kind of withdrawing. So this is something that shows now in the data, very recent actually. It wasn't so clear before, and that's why I want to share it here. It's really a kind of crash that we are seeing. It's really a disruption, a serious disruption that's happening here. The causes are many, not just geopolitics in Taiwan. It's also China's slowing economy, higher rates in the US, supply chain relocations to Southeast Asia and India. Then we have a US executive order from August. Now you've heard about that, targeting outbound investment. This will all likely accelerate decoupling of these very active investment sectors, because all sensitive kind of sectors of the Chinese economy will be targeted by that executive order, and they will probably broaden it. There's a lot of debate already in Congress about broadening this outbound investment screening and control. Trade had been a very positive story, holding things together. Just until the first quarter this year, I was convinced that trade would hold the whole picture together. And this is shifting now again, because usually, we had a trade record between the volume record between the US and China last year still. But you see how it is sinking here, and then they have it's as a moving average. The yellow graph is important here, that this is really rapidly sinking for many reasons. One is the direct kind of sensitive high value goods from China are being reduced and being imported from other areas. But most importantly, many investors are investing now in Mexico and other places in Southeast Asia, thereby circumventing the Chinese export controls that the US is targeting at China. It's kind of a circumvention trade that we are seeing here. But still, the moving average makes it clear here that China's share of US imports is rapidly sinking presently. That's surprising to me. Very recent data, very up-to-date data showing now the picture more clearly, much more clearer than last year. An important story for you, I think, is what's happening in the currency markets. And you see the debt markets here, the US Treasuries first. Now we see a steady reduction. Once, you see it here, China had a share, the deep blue graph, of 1.2 trillion US dollar treasuries in US dollars as a holding. And this has sunk. Now I have the recent data, didn't indicate it here yet. In June 2023, it was 835 billion US dollar only. So sinking rapidly, but not fully decoupling. But the trend is clear. China wants to get away from the US dollar system, wants to get away from US debt. And they are actively, in a planned way, in a purposeful way, they are doing it, they are undertaking it. This is a shift. You see, Japan is going the other way, actually, in this period here. Big changes that have to do with this here, with the de-dollarization. China is pursuing now, and everybody understands it why, a very active strategy to move away from dollar in their trade relationships, but also long-term in capital markets. That might become very important for you because the renminbi has doubled its share in global trade finance since 2022. You see here on the right-hand side, when Russia invaded Ukraine and the US dollar was weaponized as for exerting pressure on Russia, China understood immediately, it happened to Iran already, this will happen to us next. So we have to move away from the dollar hegemony, dollar predominance, to be safe, to be sanctions-proof. And that's what they are very actively doing. There's a lot going on presently. There's a trend towards US dollar avoidance, active avoidance in Chinese trade finance. The big thing is they are buying oil in the Gulf region, paying it with yuan. And the Gulf region, the Gulf states are buying bonds, government bonds and state-owned enterprise bonds in China in renminbi that are denominated in renminbi, in the Chinese currency. That's a really new thing, a really new game. They have an alternative cross-border payment system that is up and running. The petro-yuan, that's what I just tried to explain. We had a petro-dollar beforehand. Now there's a petro-yuan in the making. The Gulf countries are very interested in that and supporting it. We have a digital yuan pilot programs with the United Emirates, for example, circumventing the US dollar. Again, Project M-Bridge, it's called, a big thing. And we have a lot of internal corporate financing in China and around China that is being conducted now in renminbi. There are many shifts here going on, and this de-dollarization, please be aware of that. The dollar is under, I would say, organized attack now. This is not just an ephemeral thing, temporary kind of movement. China and its collaborators, trading partners, the BRICS Plus, you have heard that, in the Global South, many countries in the Global South, they want to move away from what they call US dollar hegemony. That's a very active strategy, and it will hurt currency markets, no doubt about it. Not in the short run. Will this work, this de-dollarization effort, in a global way? China openly strives for that, but it's not toppling the US dollar. It's not pushing it out. It's chipping away at it, just slice by slice, reducing it, decimating US dollar. They are playing a long game again. Yeah? It's patient, it's multi-pronged. Many alternatives are being offered to trade partners, and there's broad support. Again, I want to stress that. In BRICS Plus, we had that meeting. Now, BRICS and BRICS Plus, or the major global economies in the Global South, they support it. They are kind of unanimous at that. And many other conflicts are there brewing between India and China, Brazil and India. There are many conflicts, but as to the US dollar, they are unified. They want to reduce the role of the US dollar. There are several buts here. Yeah, that's clear. The renminbi is a weak currency in terms of convertibility. It's not convertible. We have very tough and tightened capital controls presently again. We have a very weak legal framework in China and recurrent drastic political interventions in market activity that broke the neck of Sequoia, actually. And this idea to create a common BRICS trading currency, this appears really almost ridiculous, I'd say, because some people are speculating that will be built on the gold standard, but there won't be one central bank. There won't be one economic policy for India and China, for example. They don't get along. Yeah? This is really a kind of vision that I don't share, that I don't buy, I have to say. So in the short term, midterm, this predominance of the US dollar is hard to challenge, especially in forex deposits, forex trading volumes. But the renminbi, and this is what we have to prepare for, will play a growing role in an international financial system that will be fragmenting, that will be constantly chipped away at, that will be really reduced in its unified US dollar predominance that we have seen in the past decades after World War II, at least. If we set up an inventory of the current state of US-China economic exchanges, the picture is not for optimisms. for optimists. I have to say, I was much more optimistic at the start of that year that this would be kind of contained, this kind of decoupling trend. But you see here, it's a rough inventory, but I could give you a lot of evidence on every point here. Trade is going down at least. It's still kind of, holding ground, but not really growing. Human exchanges, currencies, financial services, and really what is really negative is what's happening in secondary and also now primary capital markets, direct investments, data and information, you know that, and most importantly, semiconductors and high-tech components. Their decoupling is marching at a very high speed already. So this is really splitting apart, so to stress it, the two most important economies, the two biggest, largest economies of the world, splitting apart and actually containing, reducing their cooperation, and this means loss of wealth and means a lot of new conflicts that come with it. Unfortunately, I would be happy to be the bearer of more kind of optimistic news, but at present, I have to say, things are really accelerating in this direction. And this is relatively new. The data from June only showed that, from June this year. Clear tendencies in many, many areas. What are the consequences for the global economy? These are new structures that are emerging. What is completely overlooked, completely ignored, I think, in the Western Hemisphere, especially in the US, is what's happening to the Chinese economic trading partner spectrum. This is really a big thing here. They are building silently but constantly a China-centered economic and technological hemisphere. And here, I don't want to go into the details. These are only the major projects, more than $1 billion investment that China has undertaken in building infrastructure, especially IT infrastructure, telecom infrastructure in the global south. And you see here, the redder it gets, the more important Chinese investment is. And you see here that in terms of information technology and telecommunications, data centers, including e-government, these are the clouds here, and then the cameras, public security and surveillance systems, especially in Africa, I see that also in Latin America. China is building the infrastructure, the modern infrastructure for the global south. Not Western companies, not US companies, not European, not Japanese companies. It's American companies. And if you bring infrastructure, if you have the standard-setting power for telecoms networks, for data centers and so on, then you are the opener for the other companies that are coming. You first build telecom, you need energy, you build energy nets, you build up the cloud structure, and then BYD comes, the networked cars, the networked mobility. That's the idea behind it. And they are really in a planned way, and I think in a brilliant way, I have to say, from a strategic perspective, in a brilliant way, they are building up a hemisphere in the global south that is dependent on China, that will be dependent on China in the future. And the West is losing ground. I could have shown you now the comparison between investments and trade of US and China dominance in South America, Latin America, for example. America is rapidly losing ground here. And this is the big story. This is the new kind of globalization. This is the parallel globalization that we are seeing. That is taking place presently. China has the idea about dual circulation. You've heard that China is the center of things. It's domestic value creation that counts. They export high value to the global south, and they import raw materials as intermediate goods. This is the dual circulation model that they are building presently. We know that from Western traditions, clearly, from our economic history. We try to do the same, quite successfully, actually. And China is repeating this story now in its exchanges with the global south. They wouldn't say that. This is analytical here. The public, the propaganda story, the public story clearly is we are doing this as a win-win collaboration and so on. But clearly China is building up structures in this parallel globalization that will benefit China. No doubt about it. This is probably the most consequential and most important graphic that I want to show you. What I see presently emerging is two separate technospheres, I call them, technological hemisphere. One is China-centric, one is US-centric, and we came from tech cooperation, and now it's bifurcation. I call it harmless. Bifurcation, just splitting up, breaking up, in a way. And you see that here, it's a geopolitical story, but also a technology story, which is probably more lasting and more important here. You see that it's all the technologies, connectivity technologies that we know, they are being mirrored, actually, in the Chinese hemisphere. We have a China 6G that is mirrored in the US. We have an XG alliance. Importantly, the subsea cable system that is for internet, for transnational internet traffic is indispensable. The Chinese partners are being pushed out of the multi-sponsor networks that the Americans are leading, and China's building their own transnational global subsea network system now. That's the infrastructure. We have completely different ideas about AI. We have open AI in the name already of the most important market player in the US. In China, it is clearly guided AI. Regulation must precede the advance of AI. That's the idea in China. Completely different story. We have a navigation system, just to be short here, of BDS, Beidou system in China, that is globally active, that can be targeted by every Chinese smartphone now, and this will replace GPS in the Chinese hemisphere. GPS won't be the standard anymore. We have operating systems on smartphones that are different here. iOS, Android dominating in the West, and Ali OS, Alibaba, Harmony OS is Huawei's operation system will be different. We have a different concept for Internet of Things, IoT, and we have different ideas for currencies and currency transactions in the digital sphere of the future. What I want to stress here, because these are key technologies for the future, this is not just about markets or geopolitics. The result of this development, if it goes on like that, will be different cultures, different cognitive and communicative worlds. They will be splitting up. And this is more serious. People will see the same problems in a very different explanatory way. They will perceive the same events in a completely different way. They will deal with problems in a completely different way. This is really, if this hardens here, and I see it hardening. I'm pursuing that now for 3 years already, just checking all the technologies. This is the most consequential part of the whole thing. This not geopolitics driven alone, it's also driven by technology kind of predominance, yeah, the idea that you have to do the first mover effects and all these things, and to really set the standards for the new technologies to become independent. That's the idea here. This is driven and being accelerated by the rivalry in geopolitics, and it produces starkly different standard norms, regulatory systems, business models, and this will work to restructure global markets. And China will be in the global south, as I said, will very likely be in a very strong position, no matter what the Western Hemisphere says about it, and feels about it, and does about it. So this is kind of a very important development that also for investors will provide kind of new stories. I'll return to that. The geopolitical consequences. If you take a look at the kind of status of the conflict, we are clearly in the realm, after having punitive tariffs and export controls on the left-hand side here, this trajectory of the conflict, we have a Cold War syndrome now brewing. Cold War syndrome is defined here by the broadening economic sanctions, blacklist, by an arms race, cyber attacks, what the Chinese would say logic bombs, that the Americans are implanting code in China's infrastructure that can be activated in its malware, yeah, in times of active conflict. There's a blame game going on back and forth from both sides here, and we have military incidents close to that, yeah, of naval ships in the Taiwan Straits, and also of fighter jets in the South China Sea was close already this year in many ways. It's not yet a hot war. There are still ways to handle it, clearly, by dialogue, by having safety kind of red telephone lines and things like that. But be aware of that. The Cold War syndrome, this heating up of a conflict, this generalized threat perception and hostility is undisputable. It's there on both sides. And the Biden administration is much milder than what is being debated in Congress, on both sides, yeah, of the party spectrum. Among Republicans and Democrats, the Congress is much more radical on China than the Biden administration. The Taiwan conflict is kind of, you know that, brewing. China wants Taiwan under control. It's a domestic Chinese affair, so no debate about that. Taiwan doesn't like the idea. It's the Hong Kong model is being suggested from Beijing. It has no support, and there's more and more military aid to Taiwan from the US. We have a very tense stalemate here, and no room for negotiation, because the Chinese side, this is a domestic affair. There's nothing to debate about that. And the American side, that we have to protect it. Yeah, this is a lively democracy and a partner. And it was a major non-NATO ally, it was called. Taiwan was called in one piece of legislation that hasn't been issued yet. A major non-NATO ally, even. Yeah, this was clearly a provocation from the Chinese point of view. The determinants of the future are something we have to discuss now. It's from the Chinese side, it's about historic opportunities. If there is an opportunity to kind of reunify with Taiwan, they will try to grasp it. Taiwan is building up smart defenses, so there's time pressure on both sides. And the US foreign policy is shifting back and forth. Yeah? The question is how much resolve is there on the US side, and how much military capacity to act will be there in case of a dramatic escalation. The scenarios, and this is now kind of scary stuff, but fortunately the most scary scenarios are not on the table, I have to say that. I mean several geopolitical and strategic circles that are debating this. It's usually transatlantic circles debating these scenarios. So this is not just my wisdom, it's really a kind of collective wisdom here. No one counts on negotiated reunification, what Beijing wants, yeah, that this will happen. There's a lack of support, complete support in Taiwan and US. What is happening presently is scenario 2 here, the intensifying military coercion and intimidation. We had 100 fighter planes yesterday flying over to Taiwan, and some of them crossing this air defense identification zone again. There's a constant military threat there now, and it's really kind of a coercion and intimidation tactic that is being pursued by the People's Liberation Army from China. That's the current trajectory. We have a clear perspective for sea blockades because they are being prepared. You see that here, the red kind of exercise, military exercise maneuver areas here on the map, they clearly give indications what is happening. The operational preparation for a sea blockade is already there. And this will bring, this alone, I see that as the very most likely next step in this conflict, the sea blockade. This can be partial, temporary, or complete, but this will have massive global impact. Everybody here in the room knows about TSMC and how crucial this is, indispensable company for high-end semiconductors. If this happens, I expect drastic US G7 sanctions on China within a short period of time already. So this would be already a very bad situation for the world economy. What would be even worse, local war, so an invasion, with a limited and belated response from the US. When might this happen? China is hesitating, as we know from the internal discussions. The amphibious capabilities are still limited. We have a clear superiority of the American side in submarine technology and subsea technology, subsea weapon systems, so they are careful about that, cautious. But scenario 4 would become much more likely in case of domestic upheaval and military indecision in the US. And this is now the point. We are close to the next election in the US, just 1 year to go from here. Imagine we have an undecided outcome and the central policymakers can't make decisions anymore. There might be even kind of upheaval in the politics arena or even civil war-like situations. This would be really, from the Beijing perspective, this would be a historical opportunity. This is 1 year away. And this is how things are being discussed also. So this next US election next year is extremely important, not just for the US or for its partners, but really for geopolitics in general. It'll be a decisive point in time. I'm a little bit scared, I have to say, about that, clearly. Yeah? And many people are very worried about that. World war, very unlikely, because this scenario is even less likely in case of military indecision in the US. This won't happen. To have a full-blown military confrontation with China will be very unlikely as it stands now. This is the way. So be prepared for intensifying military intimidation, the coercion strategy, for sea blockades, maybe partial, temporary, but this will already give a lot of trouble to the world economy. I can't take that from the table. I would like to be more friendly and more bright in my statements here, giving you a brighter world. But there's really a lot of tension now and a lot of concrete conflict occasions that might happen. Consequences for transnational investors. What I want to stress here, and we see it already evolving here, that we have to take care of the specific geopolitical risk profile of global assets. This is not taken too seriously yet, I think. But the investment world is really split and splitting apart and being highly nuanced and differentiated. If we just take simple things like the share of global sales, dependency on the China market, or share of global sales, dependency on the US market. This is the simple graph here, just to show what this means. That, for example, here in the red color, that big tech that is usually seen as one category is completely split apart if we take a geopolitical risk profile as the standard. Then, and we see it presently, Qualcomm, NVIDIA, Tesla and Apple are extremely exposed to any geopolitical escalation that we will be seeing in the next few years. And we see it with Apple. You probably have heard about that. This is the most striking case presently. The Chinese government has banned Apple phones from government employees and state-owned enterprises now. Apple has about 20% of global share sales in China, but more importantly, Apple has 85% of its manufacturing capacity in China. 85%. To be frank about it, if something goes wrong there, Apple is finished. And this is big. This is big. So Apple is presently, and there's a lot of debate in the background actually, what they should be doing. They are trying to relocate their supply chain to India, to Southeast Asia. They are supply chain heroes, yeah, really, procurement heroes, Tim Cook. But this is really difficult to do. Whereas others, I want to stress that here, like Microsoft or Alphabet, they are not exposed to these geopolitical risks. They are a completely different story. They are Western Hemisphere players, as many others also. You see all the German players here, Volkswagen, Infineon, BASF, they are really exposed to China risk and to geopolitical risk. Whereas others, you see them down here, they are more kind of neutral. Yeah? Some of them are deeply embedded in the Western Hemisphere, like clearly Vonovia or Deutsche Telekom also. So please, I want to point at that situation here that you don't have a look at business models only. If you take a look at the geopolitical risk profiles, this universe of investment opportunities is really seen in a different way. And I'm working with some investors on these things there. Some people would talk about a Cold War fund that has to be there now, yeah? A fund that avoids all the Cold War risks that we are seeing. So these are the discussions that are being undertaken presently. Productive responses now. There are novel opportunities also for investors, clearly. The deepening politicization, I'm warning about that. Geopolitical conflicts, they won't go away. They will be structural features of a systemic conflict. And there are many business models that have worked well so far. They do not work well under the current tense geopolitical transformation. So we have to accept this. The red points are the warnings. The green sentences are the positive options for actions. Accept this transformation as a lasting, as a structural condition for transnational investments, and rethink, revise established business investment models, and embrace the bifurcation, make use of it. The bifurcation is happening in the world, and we can make use of it. Some cases for you, because you will be interested in that. I just tried to gather some information on major cases here. Voicing complaint about all that is rare. There was one association that did it, not any success vis-à-vis China. Loyalty is one thing, plain business as usual. Keeping quiet and hoping for the best. That's what BlackRock and Fidelity are doing. In China, the joke about them is they feel like they are the wolves of Wall Street. But in China, they are the sheep of the Communist Party. Different story. So that's a provocative thing, clearly. But in BlackRock and Fidelity, they try to play with the Communist Party in China. Let's see how far they get with that. We have attempts to survive even a freeze-out on the hands of the Chinese government. Bain & Company, Mintz, they are doing the due diligence research in China. There have been raids. There have been people arrested for espionage. This summer. Not good. They are trying to survive. Then we have exit, kind of high-profile cases. Vanguard Group, they are exiting quietly so far, reducing operations, investment staff in China, also withdrawing from Hong Kong. They have drawn a very different conclusion from BlackRock, for example. Some are selling quietly all China investments. Artemis Investment did that, quite a big player also, and several US pension and university funds have done that. Then we have a hard breakup as an option. Down here, the splitting of organizational business models. That's what Sequoia Capital, Sequoia China are doing. And a carve-out, that's new, actually carving out China operations, China units, and preparing separate IPOs for China units in Hong Kong or Shanghai. That's what AstraZeneca has announced. And there are many debates also among German players about that strategy, the carve-out, and separate IPOs for China units in the Chinese hemisphere. Interesting new model, actually. Soft diversification, this is the kind of mainstream and the softest way, the kind of most unproblematic way, refocusing investment just strategically with a clearly long midterm perspective away from China to other parts of Asia. That's what other big players like KKR and Carlyle are doing here. Also GIC from Singapore, quite an important kind of trailblazer for China investments in the past, but now they are refocusing investment. Now, this is the way how you can handle it. These are the options that are on the table. how to handle it. I think that's almost anything that could be, anything could be grouped under these categories. Last slide now, early warning system. We need an early warning system. We have to keep track, that's important, not just of the business models and all the figures in the economic world, but keep track of the political pipeline, especially in the US, and the extraterritorial impact of US sanctions and investment controls. Even if the Europeans and the Japanese don't like what is happening, what is coming out of as legislation from the US, they will have to deal with it. So please be aware, this political pipeline, that's a good thing about the US, you see it coming. You see it coming, what's in the pipeline. And there are dozens of pieces of law that will target China that are still in the pipeline in Congress. Beware of secondary sanctions, that's an up-to-date story. Chinese banks are heavily involved in financing Russia. And that would mean, from the American perspective, financing Russia's war against Ukraine. And there might be secondary sanctions on the table, short term already. This would be a big thing for Chinese banks because they need US dollar liquidity, and this will probably aggravate financial instability in China. That's a different story, but be aware that will heighten tensions again. Yeah? So prepare for more tensions, for more sanctions directed against Chinese businesses from G7, and prepare for more squeezes from both sides on foreign companies and assets that will be undertaken by the Chinese government. This is the situation, the overall situation. But the proactive options, again, green, that you can take, you need to establish strategic foresight that identifies these concrete geopolitical risks for every asset, every business that you want to invest in. The geopolitical risk profile is indispensable for future investment. You try to divest assets, that's what I would recommend, that are directly threatened by geopolitical conflicts and sanctions. So that's why some people are thinking about Apple now, or even NVIDIA. NVIDIA has sales shares in the superstar for artificial intelligence, sales shares in China of 20-25%. The good thing for them, as opposed to Apple, is they have all their manufacturing capacity in Taiwan for high-end chips with TSMC. But if something goes wrong in the Taiwan Straits, they will be hit hard again. So NVIDIA is also exposed not to the China risk in the way that Apple is, but to a Taiwan risks, actually. So this is just to give some examples here. We can make use of structural shifts that are undertaken presently. They are providing opportunities in currency management. I'll talk about de-dollarization, corporate finance, that's important, what's happening there, local currency funding, but also capital markets, the hemisphere-driven dynamics. There's new opportunities in that because there will be big companies will be coming out of it. Like BYD, I think I see it already as a global south company at least. This is clear. They will be expanding like mad. They have the full value chain. This is something, just to give an example, what's happening, what is driving these dynamics there. And please pay special attention to this novel parallel globalization that is China-centered in the global south. There will be major investment opportunities in those countries that benefit from that. Yeah? In those countries they will provide major investment opportunities with China's expansive activities in these emerging and developing markets. There might be some new eagles, that's the new word. Some people don't like emerging markets. Eagles are the emerging growth-leading economies now. That's a new story. And China is trying to push these. And there's clearly a lot of opportunity. So I'm coming to an end. I'm looking forward to a lively debate, and thank you for your attention. Thank you.
To order some snaps to digest. So gosh, yes, that has to be digested. And my impression is indeed that even in our community, right, I'm not so sure how aware the world is, even the professional world, if you like, which is very focused on this micro attention, obviously, of these macro developments. So indeed, I would invite you to ask questions, give it some thought. Let me start maybe. Where do we stand? Where do we Europeans and we Germans stand in this play?
This is a delicate question because I'm involved in some of the deliberations there, but clearly, let me be frank here in this room. It's the European Union and also Germany's foreign policy, they were not built for this situation. The European Union was built for a world of peace, of collaboration, of open markets, of free trade. And that's the creed, kind of, that the European Union is trying to defend even today in today's world. The European Union and German foreign policy were not built for a situation where you have wars again, where you have threats, where you have coercion, where you have protectionism, all these ugly things that we are seeing now. We don't want to see them, but we cannot wish them away. And so the problem that I see presently, and I can really, I want to be frank about it, I think the European Union in its current shape is a geopolitical dwarf. So this is nothing that could compete with what is happening in this large-scale US-China conflict that we're seeing here. So we are being pushed around. We are clearly allies of the US. Some people would like, corporations usually want to sit on the fence and to deal with both sides, continue to deal with both sides. It's becoming more and more difficult. You've probably heard about that the competition in China vis-à-vis German automobile producers is getting tougher and tougher. They are making money only with combustion engine cars anymore, not in the electric vehicle market. Then we have protectionist measures from the European Union now against Chinese electric vehicles. Foreign trade share is sinking. Actually, China had an 8% trade share. It has sunk within 1.5 years to 6% only, so only 6% of German exports are now going to China. So the importance is sinking, but not in supply chains. That's the vulnerable thing. We could talk about decoupling a lot, but almost any European firm, producing firm, is dependent on major inputs in the supply chains from tier 1 to tier 5 of the supply chain. This is not to be untangled, I think, in the short term. This will take 10 years at least to reduce that. So we are still kind of interdependent and entangled in that. But let me be frank, the great game of this geopolitical conflict is being played out at the centers of the central policy-making structures in Washington and Beijing. That's the game is not being driven by the Europeans. We are followers in a way. And fence-sitters sometimes.
Great outlook, yeah.
Yeah, that's again, the European Union was not built for a world of military coercion and influence zones and hard politics, hard power, that we are seeing again. And we have to catch up with that, or we will be pushed around.
Questions from the audience. Christian.
What about companies like Volkswagen? They are a major manufacturer in China. They cannot just stop manufacturing in China. How are they dealing with that?
This is, as you know, they are trying to fence it presently to deal with both markets, the US markets and China. And they are extremely dependent in terms of not just revenues, but profits on the Chinese market. That's really much more important. It's a little bit hidden in the figures. But they can't leave. It's impossible, clearly, from the business model perspective. What's important for them is they are usually in joint venture structures in China. So they are partnering with Chinese, usually state-owned enterprises. And this gives them a little bit of a protective shield, protective umbrella in China, but clearly makes them more exposed to American sanctions. They have a very tiny production facility. It's just very minor things in Xinjiang, you know that, they're in the Uyghur region, that has been sanctioned by American law officially, and they are having lots of pressure because of that there. So what I'm afraid, as far as Volkswagen is concerned, I see them losing market share rapidly in China. Market share is built on combustion engines only. Electric vehicles, they don't have competitive products so far, as seen from the Chinese consumers' perspectives, and so they will lose ground. They will be sinking slowly, and at the same time, the American market has many promises. This is now what's happening. Again, a reindustrialization that's taken place in China, in the US, I think quite successfully. This is pulling investors to the other side, and also the business models are being redirected now. That's also for other car producing companies. This has a pull now. It's very difficult. What might happen in the end is the Volvo or MG story in the most extreme. You've probably heard that Volvo was taken over by Geely. MG was taken over by the British brand, by SAIC, by the Shanghai Automobile Corporation, a state-owned enterprise, and they are using Western markets now to expand in Western brands to expand in Western markets. And this is something that we should be aware of because, let's face it, Mercedes-Benz, 20% already Chinese-owned. 20% Chinese owned. So this is the way that I foresee for the next future, that there might be kind of shifts, yeah, in access to markets, in ownership forms also, but also in brands and brands that have been targeting individual markets. There might be quite some differentiation that is brewing there. But for Volkswagen, to be frank, I'm not very optimistic, I have to say that.
In the back, yeah.
Is there explanation why there's a different strategy for BlackRock and Vanguard? Because they are 100% as you just showed.
I didn't get the
BlackRock and Vanguard, why they
Vanguard,
have
okay, right.
opposite strategies to handle.
They are bleeding money, all of them. Also BlackRock and Fidelity. What they hoped for was there was an opening up of the capital market, especially this pensions and insurance market, structures, the funds and things like that, fund management. This didn't happen so far. And Vanguard made the early decision to save that money. And as I said, the loyalty guys, or the little bit sheepish guys, strangely, are BlackRock and Fidelity that try to pursue the old strategy. I don't think this will work out. So it's interesting, really, this kind of very different conception of what is happening. But I know from many, many others that this idea that the Chinese pension system and fund management will be growing like crazy, yeah? This is not happening, and it's not open to foreign businesses so far. Still not, yeah? Even though there are regulatory provisions that allow it.
Reinhard.
We see this year a slowdown in the economic growth in China, a clear slowdown.
Yeah.
What is the impact on the outlook you have given to us?
So China is slowing, really strikingly in a way, unexpectedly, because everybody almost expected a kind of catch-up situation after the opening, after the COVID restrictions. It didn't happen so far. It was just a very, very brief period where this happened. So we have a structural slowdown, I would see it that way, because we have many issues there. The old growth model doesn't work anymore. It's built on infrastructure, on real estate. It was built on exports. This is not working anymore. So there are some people who already talk about managing the decline of China and it will go down the drain. I don't see that yet. So I'm really, in that respect, I'm in a very different camp, I have to say. I see China as not having used yet all its means that are at the disposal of the government. So the big bazooka, some people would say, they haven't pulled them out yet. They haven't used them yet. There are some, they don't want to do it, yeah, because they don't want to have these distortions again, yeah, that they had seen in the past in those situations. But still, China is not finished, is not in decline in a way, so that the West could trust that the problem will dissolve itself in a way, will be going away by itself. This I don't see as a realistic option. So the slowdown will be there. We have demographic issues, also mid and long term. Clearly, this will be apply the brake to Chinese development growth, no doubt about it. And we have these geopolitical rivalries that pull away investment now, and also know-how, and also technologies from China. So this is all, it's very problematic, but China has built up, I want to be frank about that, built up an innovative capacity and a research capacity. You see that in many indicators. Research papers by citation, but also patents now, and also new technologies that are being rolled out worldwide. What Huawei has done now, I didn't mention that. Huawei has just 2 weeks ago, they brought out a new 5G phone that was almost completely free of Western components. And this was a shock to Apple again, because everybody expected the Western providers, the Western suppliers, for being superior. This was just a small kind of charge, a small volume of smartphones maybe. These are kind of experimental semiconductors they are still using there. But it was striking how innovative a firm like Huawei is. And this is a real powerhouse. Huawei is being attacked from many sides, maybe justifiably so in some cases, but this is a super innovative firm. They have 100,000 development engineers. They are working in 3 shifts every day. Yeah? And this is where the power comes from. This is where how they can develop these things. And this is really, so never underrate the innovative capacities of China. They have caught up a lot. They are really impressive at that. I really have to say that. No doubt about it. No doubt.
And impressive has been this keynote, Sebastian. Thank you so much for great insights. Really, the macro view. It's a thriller we are heading for, and well, at least we are a bit prepared now. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.